All right, greetings, everybody. I would like to welcome the viewing audience and the audience in live here at the Rutherford County, Tennessee Courthouse to the Public Works and Planning Commission meeting of August 8th, 2023. I would like to start off by, first of all, welcoming everybody to our first meeting of our new fiscal year. And I would like to call on our Vice Chair, Mr. Commissioner Steve Piercy, for approval of the last minutes of our last meeting of the last fiscal year.
Chairman Cush, I have reviewed the minutes and find them in order and will move for their approval.
Thank you. We have a motion for, and I need a second. Second. We have a second. All those in favor? One second while I visit. All right, very good. All right. New this fiscal year, we have a public, all committees have a public comments period. Those will be limited to 3 minutes. The topics must be related to the committee agenda topics. We have 2 people that signed up today, and I am going to start with Jeremy Abar. Is that correct? There, Jeremy? No, I don't see a Jeremy. All right, we will move on to Susan Allen. Thank you, Susan. If you will come up, and as usual, I believe we'll just do name, address, the good stuff, your social security number, and all the good things. Yeah, blood type would be good. And then we will start your 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Susan Allen. I live on Nelson Lane in Murfreesboro. At the recent Republic Open House, one of their storyboards proclaimed, quote, "There is no trash crisis. Expanding Middle Point is the solution," end quote. Well, from the feedback the RNA is continuing to hear, that is not the solution. Number one, Rutherford County citizens do not want the landfill to expand because of the nuisance it has become and the history of changing promises. Number two, if you are not okay with being forced into allowing Republic to expand into the V that the county owns, which is what they want, then you are obligated by the state to have a positive alternative to where the county waste will go. Number three, the timeline for the point at which the landfill will be full, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, simply means Rutherford County needs to plan now for another option to dispose of our garbage. Based on the current data from Plan Rutherford, which estimates county population being over 500,000 by 2045, and GNRC's April Solid Waste Task Force estimate of almost 1 million in the region, in only 5 years, it is indisputable that more people, more businesses, and more industry will mean more garbage filling Middle Point faster and faster. Number four, advantages of a transfer station and securing an end destination for our solid waste now are that, one, we will be ahead of the game for the inevitable day when Davidson and other counties are scrambling to find a place to send their solid waste. Number two, building a transfer station now will avoid inevitable increases in construction costs that always occur over the years. Three, funding for the transfer station will ensure that the residents of Rutherford County have an alternative to having Trash Mountain continue to grow. Republic is advocating for expansion, but remember, the residents of Rutherford County do not want the landfill. Five, if we don't have the transfer station, we won't be able to negotiate when it comes to the point at which we have no solution to what to do but to allow them to expand, which would mean 35 more years of literally being dumped on. Please vote in favor of the transfer station bond issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Jeremy, did you make it? All right, perfect. Yes, yes. I was caught in that yesterday and late for the steering committee. If you will state your name and address for the record, please, Jeremy, and then we will start the clock.
My name's Dr. Jeremy Aber. I live at 3315 Yorkshire Court here in Murfreesboro. I don't have a huge, long, planned list of things I want to say about this other than when I first started getting involved in learning about our landfill and our solid waste situation here in the county, one of the things that I heard was that our local government, both the city and the county, were frustrated with the fact that they have no control, that BFI or Public Services does whatever they want and we have no say in that. You know, we have abdicated all responsibility to this private company and we're at their whims. I don't think that continuing to support that company is going to change anything there. I think having the transfer station is a really important piece of the puzzle for how we move forward. It gives us some bargaining power, it gives us flexibility, it gives us the potential to lead our own destiny in how we want to approach solid waste. I think that it's an important and essential part of how we move forward here. There are a million scenarios I can envision where we have, you know, what we thought was a sure thing in the landfill suddenly is not available to us any longer. And if we wait to the last minute to do anything about that, it's going to be too late. We have to do it now. We have this in the budget, as I'm led to believe. We have, you know, the plans. We have everything in place. We just need to make it happen. We can have another 30 years or 40 years of some, you know, billionaire company from out of state dictating how we deal with our solid waste and what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do, or we can take control of this, take control of the destiny of our own county and our own people. I think it's really important that we support this transfer station. I think it's a big piece of the puzzle of how we move forward, and I just want to support that and say that I really, really, really hope that you all vote for this. I'm pretty tired of having people not from here, not directly involved in our community, that don't actually care about whether or not we're succeeding or whether we are flourishing, saying, this is how we're going to do it, because me, down in Arizona, this is how I'm going to get rich. I don't care about people in Arizona getting rich, and I don't want them to get rich off of my back. So I really want to see the transfer station built so that we can take some control back for how we're dealing with our own solid waste. All right, thanks.
Jeremy, thank you for your comments. That concludes our public comment section. I would like to kind of just dovetail into something that is not on the agenda, but something that just came up within the last day or so. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Mayor Carr to an announcement that he'd like to make.
Thank you, Chairman Cush. So as this committee and our community is fully aware that we had a tragic tornado strike the Reedville area the 1st of April, there was an absolutely Herculean effort on the part of this county, the Solid Waste Division, Director Brooks's Highway Board, a number of volunteers, I mean literally hundreds of volunteers poured into the Reedville community to assist in that cleanup. That cleanup, as you know, was expected to take 4 or 5 weeks. We did it in 10 days, not just Rutherford County, but the Cannon County's portion as well. And that's what neighbors do, and that's what we did. Part of that equation was the removal of a significant amount of construction debris as a result of tornado damage. And I want to announce tonight that I am very pleased that Republic Services has forgiven a $102,217.11 invoice in totality for at the cost of removal debris. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read an email from Mr. Mike Clausen that was sent to me this morning. Mayor, following up on our phone call, this is to confirm we are good to write off the entire amount of the Reedville Disaster Disposal Project. Nothing is owed by the county associated with this effort. We discussed the FEMA reimbursement process and the likelihood that some portion less than 100% of the cost would likely be reimbursed by FEMA to the county within the next 2 years. Even so, considering our original commitment and the desire to let the county finish up their accounting on this matter, Middle Point is moving forward with a full cost forgiveness. Thanks, Mike Clausen. So I just want to recognize Republic Services and Mike Clausen for being here tonight for that very, very generous offer, and we appreciate it, Mike. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Chairman.
Michael, thank you. Thanks for stepping up to the plate. Appreciate that. Highway Department, Mr. Greg Brooks? And while Greg's on his way, for those of you who do not know Miss Carla Hill, Carla is stepping in for Rachel tonight, who had some personal business to take care of. So welcome, Carla. All right, Greg.
Good evening, everyone. I have for you tonight a couple of things being brought from the road board to PW for your consent to pass them on to the full commission. I believe I have these in the order you have them. The first thing we have is a waiver of damage to abandon a frontage road K out of our road book. This all has been signed and notarized as it should be by the affected property owners. In this case, there's only one, and it is the developer of that corner. I believe it is Primetime C-Store, so all that's in order. Again, it was approved by the road board last Thursday, brought to you tonight to be moved on to the commission.
Any questions on that?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd need a second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Greg, continue on, please.
I should have mentioned, I don't know if you have a map on your iPads or not, but this is at the intersection of 840 and Sulphur Springs. So just kind of FYI. Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. Okay, the next thing I have is a contract for some grant money to do a flood study. This started back probably 2021, well, it's November 10th, 2021. And what this contract now needs is the mayor's signature. My understanding is for that to happen, that has to be approved by the commission. This is a grant to do a flood study in the Old Nashville Highway, part of the Old Nashville Highway corridor near Florence Road. It's prone to flooding during periods of heavy extended rain, and this would allow us to kind of choose a path and figure out what the structures would need to be, what the path would need to be to get it to the river. This is a 75-25 grant, and our portion of that grant would come out of our Public Works account, which I believe is $131,65,000, and our portion would be $15,000 for this study. This study should reveal the possibility of doing a project to drain that area to the river. Been working on this for a long time, and we finally have the actual contract.
I'll make a motion to approve. We've seen this come through Planning Commission when projects are contemplated out there, and so I'll make a motion to approve. And I would like to make a comment during discussion before we vote.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
How do you select this drainage shed versus another? Is this the most complaints, or you've seen the most concern, or the 65 would be sufficient to?
Well, this area, you ask a good question, and it's a couple of factors. One is how many actual residences are involved when it does flood. The other is back when Eric Hill was our PW engineer, CSX was putting in a new line, a new rail line, parallel to their existing line to alleviate some congestion at the Nissan plant. So Eric approached the people at the railroad about CSX about the restriction, the water restriction that railroad was having on the old Nashville Highway area, flood corridor right there. And believe it or not, they agreed to jack and bore an additional 60-inch culvert under that railroad. They then became a little bit apprehensive, and they kept that off because they weren't sure whether or not the right-of-way, 4170, that exists there has the capacity to handle that water, to meter it through the existing, structures that flow under the highway there. So they got nervous, capped it off. So the fact that hurdle's already been cleared, we have a plug we can pull to drain that water. Now we just need a pathway to get that water onto the river. That was a major factor, that and the fact that it impacts so many people down there. Are there other areas that could benefit from a flood study? Without question, beyond question, there certainly is.
Call for the question.
All right, let's be on the board for this since there is some money involved. So Carla, if you don't mind doing a roll call.
Commissioner Phillips? Yes. Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner P? Yes. Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Kush?
Yes. All right, that motion carries. Thank you. Greg, is there anything else?
That's all I have.
All right, thank you for your hard work.
Thank you all for your service.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Wait a minute.
All right, I'm sorry. Sorry. Whew. Missed it by that much. Missed it by that much.
Who first?
Thank you. Last month, there was some discussion about the cost of the county paving or repaving, like some county properties. Clerk's office, if I remember right, the transfer station, things like that, that we were paying what some thought was a high price to have county properties repaved. And the question was asked, could our highway department help out with that versus us going to an outside contractor? So we said that we would bring it up tonight and ask you those questions. Is that possible for the highway department to get in and do that?
Well, it would not be unprecedented. I think some of the stations that exist now were paved by the highway department through the years, some of the convenience centers. However, we are accustomed to repaving and paving streets and roads, and that's a lot different than paving a parking lot. And that's not to say we can't do it, but it's slow work done right. It's slow work, and I'm afraid it would put us behind on our normal, yearly annual paving schedule. So I would never say that we couldn't do that ever, but as a general rule, it would be better to get a quote. Now, I'd be happy to review any quote that you got from a paving contractor and tell you whether I thought it was absorbent or not. I can tell you that in the last 3 years, the cost of, well, before I tell you that, let me tell you this. The highway department bids annually our bended mix, a vendor to supply our hot mix asphalt that we use. And in the last 3 years, it's tripled. So that's huge when you start thinking about what it costs to, what a produced ton of asphalt costs just in the truck. I mean, it's 2 to 3 times higher than it was 3 years ago. So a lot of what you're seeing is probably that. But, it's still higher. It still costs more So I won't say that we would never consider that, but I would need to look at each individual project and what time of year that project were going to happen and where we were at in our annual paving schedule.
I think the question came up at property management, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chairman, and a department head was having their lot resurfaced, and then someone asked, could our highway department do that, and could they save money? So maybe evaluating some of those projects, those estimates in the future might give us a better idea as to whether we could actually save any money by doing that or not. So that's a pretty good suggestion. Thank you.
Robert, do you have a question?
Well, I really didn't have a question. I had a statement to make. At about 11:40 yesterday, I was driving into Murfreesboro on the Halls Hill Pike, and there was a huge tree came crashing down and went 2/3 across the roadway just before Sharpsville Church on the Halls Hill Pike. Well, I picked up the phone when I was volunteer fire department member. I used to just drive over and get my truck and chainsaw and go clear it myself. But since I don't have a fire department anymore, I called I called the road board, and I went on into town. I was able to get by. I came back about 45 minutes later, and the guys were wrapping up. They had cleaned that tree and got it off the highway. And Greg, I stopped you just to say thanks and tell you, your guys, they did a good job, and I told them that day, but I appreciate the quick response. And it was dangerous too, because you came out of a curve, heavy rain. Y'all saw that wind and rain that was coming down yesterday, and this was a big tree. But anyway, thanks.
Well, I will pass that. I will pass that boy on to the guys that actually did the work. But I do appreciate you bringing it up. And we had we had a lot of trees go down. I don't know. I guess it wasn't a tornado, but boy, we've been busy. So, and I think that's going to be the trend moving forward. We have a lot of dead trees in this county.
All right, seeing no more questions, you are dismissed.
Thank you.
And yes, Robert, if you will save that for a shout out on Thursday for full commission. So Greg, have your boys tune in to the television set. Bishop Wagner, if you would give us the solid waste report, and then we will hear an updated report from our friend Dan Salisbury.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor, Chairman. I'm Bishop Wagner. I'm Rutherford County Solid Waste Director. Here is the August, this is for the months of June and July, the Waste Collection and Recycling Report. Since the May report, Rutherford County Landfill accepted 490.6 tons of brush for a revenue of $14,720. We also managed 3,049 tires for a revenue of $3,404. The total combined revenue for the months of June and July 2023 is $18,124. Rutherford County Solid Waste disposed of 5,573.71 tons of waste from all sources during the months of June and July. 5,113.55 tons from convenience centers and 460.16 from schools. We recycled 896.09 tons from all sources. That is a diversion rate of 13.85 for June and July. I want to make a note that that is up from 8.87 last report, the May report. So the single stream recycling activities that we're engaged in are increasing participation. Costs associated with the landfill activities this month include $22,400 in manpower and equipment to manage brush, $7,040 for the scale house administrative staff, $71,325.50 for Liberty Tire Management, for a total cost of $100,765.50. That's for 2 months. And an income of $18,124. That leaves us at a negative $82,641.50 $82,641.50. That concludes my report.
All right, Bishop, the mayor has a question for you.
Bishop, I got a question. On those numbers from the convenience center, you said it was 5,100 tons from the convenience centers and about 450 tons from schools. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
What do we expect the schools then, how do you expect that to change now that schools are coming into session? What are you expecting there? And I'm sure you're making the necessary accommodations for the pickup, but what are we looking forward, what are we looking to in tonnage with regard to the schools?
They will at least double. I expect to see them between, 100% increase to 122% here.
Okay, so it'll approach 1,000 tons then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, keep in mind that's for the 2-month period, so we'll average around 500, 550 a month.
Question.
Yes, sir.
What does Liberty Tire do for this amount of money?
That's the money that they charge us to manage the tires. They take them to their facility in Alabama where they are recycled, repurposed, and if possible, or destroyed and buried if not possible. They then, all tires, the tires are kind of a tricky deal because the Department of Revenue issues $1 back on every new tire that's sold in the county. So although it's not represented as a revolving fund because the fund gets deposited quarterly, I believe it's quarterly, it may be monthly, but it goes back to the 116 fund through the finance office and doesn't go revolving back into ours. So we draw down on the budget from the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, it usually works out to where we break even or a little bit up, depending upon how many tires that we have to pick up out in the county, because of course, when we do road collection, we don't receive any revenues for any of those tires that we have to pick up to manage.
So this is actually showing that we're going somewhere around $50,000 for 2 months in the hole for taking tires. Is that correct?
It's correct when we're not looking at a full cost accounting. If we're looking at the money that's coming in from the quarterly payment, it's about even. It's about a wash. So it's drawing down negatively on the budgeted amount, but when we look at the 116 fund as a whole, we end up getting deposits that equal the revenue spent.
Thank you.
Mr. James.
I've got a question for each of those. Like, first with the tires, are we paying per tire or per weight? Because do we shred them? Can we shred them for more capacity?
So we deal with, I'm going to say this nicely, a ridiculous amount of tires in Rutherford County. By volume, besides Davidson County, there are very few counties that deal with the volume of tires that we deal with. We get tires in from, we're like the car sales hub, we're used car sales hub, there are a lot of tire stores that are here, so Liberty has 16 trailers located throughout the county that collect tires that end up being manifested through the tire program. Shredding those tires would be it would be a monumental task. It would be an impossible task to keep up with. The cost associated with tire shredders and the upkeep of that equipment is very prohibitive to do it even in smaller scale situations. And then you're left with, what do you do with that shredded rubber at the end? That's not in our agreement as a typical residential disposal, so therefore there would be a cost that would be associated with the disposal of that as well. Also, we wouldn't gain any beneficial use from credits from the recycling of the tires that we gain from utilizing a company like Liberty. We have, when we look comparatively across the state, we have a really good deal with Liberty compared to our next closest neighbor is probably in the $110 a ton range. We pay $70 a ton. And the cost that we charge the customers coming over the scales are $2 per tire or $70 a ton if they bring in a mixed load.
So $2 a tire. What would the amount per tire need to be to correct this imbalance?
Well, like I was telling Commissioner Piercy, it's really not an imbalance. It's because we get the money from the Department of Revenue from the program that actually brings the revenues up a touch from what we're spending. It just isn't reflected because we have to, it's not a revolving fund. We have to budget it year after year, so it's a drawdown on that budgeted amount. And it will fluctuate as we, and I have to, hopefully get the budget numbers right when I go in about what our anticipated usage is every year. And as we grow, we do get more tires, but we also gain more revenue from the new tires that are sold and that funds that are sent to the Department of Revenue.
Okay, and then on to what the mayor started with the schools. I'm curious, are they still using all the throwaway trays and utensils, et cetera?
Yes, I believe they are.
Do we have any communication in the works on trying to resolve that and get that back to minimize how much added waste that gives us each school year?
My most recent conversations with the superintendent of the custodial superintendent there has been about increasing their recycling because we've had a dismal recycling participation, and he's agreed to help work with me on that to try to get those out. But when it comes to the trays and that, removing that from the waste stream, I think that there needs to be a conversation with them about that.
It just seems kind of like if we're still paying for the giant machines to clean the trays, but then never turning them on because we have throwaways, it kind of, we're paying twice. And just wanted to know if something was even in discussion or if.
And I can't speak for their budget or what they do there, but on a personal note, I would like to see them divert more waste than generating waste.
If no other questions, I'll move to approve the report.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Did you have another additional comment?
Not on the tires, but the minutes we approved mentioned that there could be a return back from the contract on the single stream from waste management.
I was under the assumption that that was a 6-month pause. I didn't know we were coming right back this month with that.
The minutes said August.
I apologize. I had the wrong date in my mind. I can have that together for you by next month, by the next month's meeting.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. That motion carries. You want to call up Bishop Dan?
Yes, if you would please, I've invited Dan to give us an update, Dan Salisbury, to give us an update on H&A Engineering and their project toward transfer station design and engineering.
All right. Good evening, gentlemen. Carla. Okay, so if you take a look at the slides up there on your tablets, just again, the first couple look pretty familiar if you've been in the last couple months' meetings, reviewing the tasks that the county hired H&A Engineering to accomplish task 1, task 2, and task 3. Next slide. Just to familiarize everybody with where the future transfer station will be located, look at that blue X, and then the next slide will box in the actual footprint of the transfer station using, again, the existing Rutherford County Solid Waste building as a landmark. It's in the just above that, or in the top right corner of that red box you see. Next slide. And then the latest site design. Next slide. And then just to review, again, we haven't been up here in a couple months, just to review some of the major things that have been accomplished since we last met, and I gave you the update. About 3 weeks ago, we finished the site grading plan. That same day, we provided an initial rough draft of the bid packet for the entire project to the solid waste director so he could go through and start red penning it and reviewing that. Just about a week ago, we met with your solid waste director just to review what we've accomplished so far, discuss some of the options that I think I spoke a few months ago about some of the options we had engineered into the design to give us some flexibility down the road. We discussed some of that with your solid waste director. Last Friday, I did basically the same thing. We conducted a meeting with the mayor and some of the county staff, just giving them an update, discuss some of the timing implications. And then that same day when I got home, I got the Corps of Engineers approval for the dry hydrant. And again, we had been discussing a few months ago about the option of using a dry hydrant into the river, which would it'd basically pump out non-potable water that could be used for fire suppression reasons and for the daily wash down to help clean the tipping floor. So we got that approval last Friday. So next steps, I should have the SWPPP, the stormwater plan, tomorrow. As soon as I get that, I could go online to the TDEC site and submit the MPDES construction permit, which we need before we break ground with this project. I'll also submit at that time, probably the next day, I'll submit the county development application. And then from there, we've got a couple things we still owe to TDEC, and then we'll go right into the bid process. So the bid packets are pretty much done. They're pretty close to being done. They do need some final touches. And then once we get our structural engineer feedback, once we get his designs, we add those to the tail end of the bid packet, and we'll be complete. So that's the update. That's where we are right now with this project.
I've got a question for him real fast, if I may. On the dry hydrant for the permit, you said it was approved?
Yes,
Were
correct.
there any limitations on it as far as quantity or speed to which can be pulled?
What I had requested, basically as long as we do what I had requested, the same amounts that I mentioned a few months ago, about anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 gallons per day was it's pretty wide range, but that was the expected usage for the washdown water. So as long as we stay within those parameters and the basic design parameters that I laid out that I shared with you a few months ago, we're good. If we deviate drastically from any of that, then we probably need to have the Corps of Engineers take another look, but my request was approved. Yep.
What is the fire flow for that building?
The building, so unsprinkled, it was 2250 at 20 PSI for 2 hours. Sprinkled, it drops down to 1,000 at 20 PSI for 2 hours. So again, talking about engineering and options, we've got right now a plan for 2 large water storage tanks. How you fill them, we still have some options, whether we use the dry hydrant to fill those with non-potable water. If we dig under the river to the south to access water that way, we could use that to fill up the water storage tanks, or you could always pump in a hole and fill them that way. But that's the plan. And again, we do plan on sprinkling the building, the transfer station structure. So that answer your question, sir?
You can filter. I mean, you can use the dry hydrant to supply the sprinkler system.
So one of the options is to use the dry hydrant. So basically the pump will turn on and it'll pump water up to this water storage tank. That water storage tank, again, will be non-potable water. That could be used for the washdown water. It could be used, God forbid there's a fire at the structure, your fire department shows up, they could tap into, they'd have the water right there, so you wouldn't rely on the city water. So there's different
question. My question is, can it be used in the sprinkler system? I'm very aware of dry hydrants and their usage, but can it be used? Are you pumping into a tank? Are you going to filter that and then use it on a sprinkler system? That's my question.
It should be able to use it for the sprinkler system also, yes. So when I say fire suppression, for the sprinkler and for any of the fire department needs, it should be good to go for both. Yep.
That concludes Dan's presentation. I would like to add one thing, that they have worked really hard to get to this stage at this they're a little ahead of their timeline that they projected to us, and I want to thank H&A, both Dan and Ray, for their hard work, and their team for getting us this far along, and in our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. All right, item 5 on the agenda is Plan Rutherford update. Doug, thank you. Doug, I did talk to Jeff. All set for full commission.
Okay, very good. Yes, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. Just a quick update on the Plan Rutherford progress. At our Planning Commission last month, I guess that was July 24th, Jessica Hill from GNRC, the consultant team who is working on the update to our plan, gave a presentation to the Planning Commission regarding a lot of the survey results and research that have already been done. After the meeting, a couple commissioners came up to me and asked if she could make that same presentation to the County Commission. She is going to be making that next week. That's what Chairman Cush was just referring to. It's going to be pared down from what was given at the Planning Commission. But I know that was on the agenda, at least for discussion tonight, but there were no plans to actually make that tonight. That's going to be at the full commission. I will say, though, that I did send an email out to the commissioners as well as members of the Plan Rutherford Steering Committee and department heads regarding the town hall meeting that we will be having on August the 22nd. That's going to be at MTSU in their School of Concrete and Construction Management. Brooks Lamb, author of Love of the Land, Lessons from Farmers Who Persist in Place, will be giving a keynote. There'll also be a panel discussion with various community leaders. There will also be a brief presentation from GNRC personnel just regarding where they are in the plan and things like that. That event will start that evening. The reception starts at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6. And then at 6 o'clock, the actual presentations will begin. So you all should have gotten that email. If you didn't, let me know, and I'll be sure to get you that information. So that's just a quick update as to what's going on with Plan Rutherford right now. If there's no questions, I'll jump into our normal report that we have. The first is the available lot inventory through July of 2023. Since we did not meet last month, you'll notice that you have a report both for June and July. I'm really only going to concentrate on the July report, but if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that. The available lot inventory, again, this tracks the building, well, in a sense, building activity, which Ms. Bell will be talking about during her presentation. But we look at the available lots, those that are ready for permitting as we stand here and speak. Right now, as at the end of July, that number is 898. That's up about 30 from about 2 months ago. The number actually went down a little bit last month, a little further, and then kind of climbed back up. The big reason for that is, permit activity is still steady, I would say. And again, Ms. Bell will discuss that in greater detail. But we did have several larger subdivision sections that were recorded. We haven't seen as many of those recorded this year, but we did see about 2 or 3 over the last couple months. So that's why you see a little bit of a change there in the total number of available lots. That's up pretty significantly, about 200 lots or so from this time last year. So you can see overall activity has slowed down, but again, we have seen some pickup, I would say, as far as just overall activity is concerned over the last couple of months as far as recording plats. So, it's fluctuating right now. It's just kind of the environment that we're in. So if there's any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer those. If not, Mr. Chairman, I'll be more than happy to go into our rezoning and ordinance amendment report.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. I know you all have been disappointed not to see me at the County Commission over the last few months. That's ending this next week. So we've got 3 requests coming before you next week. The first is for property located on Flat Rock Road. This is by Willie Eugene Davenport. The existing zoning is residential medium density. They're looking to go to light industrial for a portion of the property. About 10 acres is the total size of the lots, but they're only looking for about 5 acres of that to be rezoned. This application was the result of a zoning enforcement action. There is an existing salvage yard along Flat Rock Road right to the north of this, which is actually part of the situation that we're dealing with. This was approved back in 2000, which allowed the current use. The property was rezoned light industrial when we adopted the current zoning ordinance and map back in 2013. The business has expanded its footprint onto adjacent property, really unbeknownst to even the property owners. They were unaware that where the property lines were and realized that the business had been occupying the back half of their property for the last several years. The property owner is requesting to rezone a portion of their property, again, that back 5 acres, to light industrial, which is the same zoning as the existing salvage yard. Now, those type businesses are only allowed by special exception in the light industrial zone, so the applicant is aware that even if the zoning is approved, that he will have to go back for special exception approval before the Board of Zoning Appeals. There really is no redevelopment plan for this property. It's really just to allow the continuation of the business as it's been ongoing over the last several years. Most of the concerns raised by the Planning Commission had to do with the extent of the business, the fact that they expanded onto additional property beyond what was originally approved back in 2000. They were also concerned about setting a precedent with approval of an expanded salvage yard that was already established but not legally approved. We did explain at the meeting how that had all come about, and that there were apparently a couple other salvage yards in the county that are running into the same situation, which we've been in contact with, so this may not be the first and only that you'll see in that regard. There were also some concerns. There was a neighbor who lives in the area asking about heavy industrial zoning, and we explained to them at the time that if they wanted that, they would have to come back and go through the same zoning process, and that seemed to satisfy his concerns. After discussion, the Planning Commission did recommend approval by a vote of 6-4 and 3 against. Our second case is for property located on Shelbyville Pike. This is by Alan Buddy Gamble. Oh, I'm sorry.
May I ask a question about that one? Sure. I was going to wait till the end, but since Mike had it up, Mike, south of the red hatched area on our SharePoint, there are some vehicles that are on a third piece of property.
Yes. Yeah, and that was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. I'm glad you brought that up. There's a couple small expansion areas, and the applicant and the business owner have been made aware that those cars need to be removed. Now, that aerial, Mike, is that a 22 or is that the 23? Or that's 23, okay. So he has been made aware that those need to go because those aren't part of the rezoning request, just for those 2 main properties. But yes, that did come up at the Planning Commission as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I could kind of follow up with that question. One of the objections, if I remember right, at the Planning Commission was not so much the expansion of that, but just the rate at which that, can I call it a junkyard, that junkyard was filling up. And there were some concerns or some questions about remediation. You know, you're bringing in a bunch of cars. At some point in time, you need to be taking some of those cars out and recycling those cars. So I think that was some of the objection to that, is that they had no plan to ever recycle any of those. So I don't know if there's an answer to it, Doug, but you know, I think going forward as we plan for the future, that needs to be part of something that we look at. If you have an expanding junkyard, there needs to be some plan put in place to alleviate some of that overcrowding by recycling some of those cars or scrap metal and those kind of things.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Questions? Mm-hmm. Sure.
I will make a comment. This is in my district. As a matter of fact, I've got another one that I'm aware of that's maybe 2 more in my district that's got similar problems. The one I want to point out on this is an existing site, and the homeowners or the owners wasn't aware that that was on there. It kind of shocks me, but they are okay with this, and then basically they're looking at this to be a revenue stream for them. The other person, the third person down there, I assume they'll have them off.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, if he wanted them off, he could call a record and have them hauled off and charged back to him anyway, and had the sheriff pick them up. I pointed that out to a couple other people that have called me about similar problems. So a lot of it's got to do with what the community is aware of and is okay with. And in this area in particular, the homeowner is fine, or the property owner is fine with that happening and going ahead. Actually, is making the request to do
Correct.
that.
Yes,
So it has a revenue stream too, and he's wanting to work with them. And the people in that area, they're aware and they use this auto salvage area. Now, as far as things leaving and being recycled, I don't know what the life is. I know a lot of these places strip like doors or mirrors or whatever, and then what's left over, they do take stuff off and get it crushed and sell. So some of that recycling is happening. But anyway, that's why I don't have an objection. I have not had the first call with anybody in that area having a problem with that. So, thank you.
All right. If there's no other comments, I'll proceed on to the next case. Again, this is on Shelbyville Pike by Buddy Gamble. He is looking to zone a portion of his property from from residential low density to light industrial. A portion of his property is already zoned light industrial, but the remaining acreage of it is not. So about 31 acres or so is already zoned light industrial, so the remainder is what he's asking for. So he's really just asking for to have the entire property zoned in a similar manner. The existing portion that is zoned light industrial was rezoned to commercial back in 1979 for the storage of heavy-duty equipment, is what the application said. It was zoned what was called C2 under the county's previous zoning resolution. That took effect back in 1984. And considering the originally proposed use and the uses in the surrounding area, when we looked at this during our last zoning map and ordinance update, we did zone the property to light industrial. There are no development plans for the property right now. Obviously, if he does want to develop something, he's going to have a site plan submitted. The use would have to meet the ordinance requirements, of course. Shelbyville Pike is a state/federal road, so TDOT approval would be required. It would also have to meet the same landscaping performance standards as any development would have to. There were some questions about the zoning in the area and how some of them came about during the Planning Commission's meeting. There was also a concern about the existing borrow area to the north, which is a couple properties removed to the north of this property, and there were some concerns about that expanding onto this, but we told them that this would not give them the right to do that. Plus, they'd have to cross a piece of property that doesn't belong to the property owner anyway. Following discussion and the public hearing, the Planning Commission did recommend approval by a unanimous vote. The third item, if there's no questions on that, is actually a zoning ordinance amendment, so not a rezoning. This is for, sorry, let's get to my iPad here. These are for some regulations for transfer stations. This would be in addition to Chapter 1103 of our zoning ordinance. As you're aware, as recent as even tonight, there has been discussion over the last several months about the county building and operating a solid waste transfer station as part of an overall strategy for solid waste management when the current landfill can no longer accept waste. We currently have no regulations for transfer stations in our zoning ordinance, so we took to doing a little bit of research on that to come up with some. We began working with our solid waste director, Mr. Bishop Wagner, our engineering staff, building codes, and also our fire and rescue staff to craft some regulations, which is what you have before you tonight. We do propose to classify this use as an extensive impact facility, which only allows it by right in the heavy industrial zone. It will allow it by special exception in light industrial and commercial general zones as well, but those would require special exception approvals by the Board of Zoning Appeals, so that would not be by right. The facilities would have to meet all state and federal regulations. You'll notice in the regulations themselves, there are some definitions as well as standards, specific standards for an operational plan, area and setback requirements. I'll be more than happy to go in as much or as little detail as you would like tonight. But Bishop Wagner is also here. He helped actually craft these regulations, especially some of these definitions, so I'm really thankful for his assistance into this. But there were some questions at the Planning Commission regarding if there was a maximum size that we were proposing. We said that we were not proposing a maximum as far as the size is concerned, but we were proposing a minimum size for the lot that it would have to be on. There were also some questions about researching other community regulations and whether there was a chance of other entities establishing a transfer station. We couldn't stop somebody from, like a private company, from using these regulations. These are not specific for just county use, but they would have to meet the same regulations as being proposed here. As far as looking at other regulations, we did do that. The model that we used actually was based heavily off of what Williamson County has in their regulations, not word for word. There were a lot of things that they were doing that we didn't feel were necessary for ours. But again, we did do research in that regard. So after discussion in the public hearing, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of these by a unanimous vote. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Commissioner Dodd.
Thanks, Chairman. The proposed setbacks and all of those have been discussed after our design. Is it, I guess,
Well,
does it infringe on our design in
It should
any way?
not, no. We had those in our design in mind when we were coming up with these regulations. We didn't want to do something that was going to jeopardize our own transfer station. But good question, though.
All right. If not any more questions, we would motion, I would like to do this one separately, because this would be entered into the book as a new standard. So I would need a motion to allow this transfer station data to be approved into the book.
Mr. Chairman, does it require a public hearing?
Yes. This will have to go for a public hearing before the Board of Commissioners next week, since it's an amendment to our zoning ordinance that would require a public hearing.
You guys on the Planning Commission, what's your thoughts about a public hearing? Is it going to be controversial?
We don't know any more about it than Doug's department knew about it.
And
So
I know this is a zoning ordinance, not a
Yeah, this isn't approving the actual
plan. It's
stamp.
just a-
Right, this is just putting the regulations into the zoning ordinance. During the public hearing, there were no comments during the Planning Commission, so no, I didn't think this was controversial. Since we're just making a change to the ordinance, we're not actually approving anything.
Chairman, I'm not sure I understood the question, but you want a separate motion for the ordinance amendment?
Well, personally, I think, other than just lumping it all together with his reports, I think this is separate thought that needs to be voted on separately or approved or advanced separately than his reports.
I don't disagree with that. If you want to take that first, I move that we approve the ordinance amendment ORD 23-002.
All right, do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Doug. Now I need a motion on acceptance of his reports.
So move.
All right, any opposed? Or all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Doug, thank you.
Could I just ask
Yes,
one more
Chair.
question? Doug, I meant to ask it before, but the first rezoning for Mr. Davenport that's in Robert's area, we have pretty strict guidelines as it comes to car repair shops as far as ground contamination, water contamination, those type of things. Do those same things exist for a junkyard?
I mean, it all handled by the state, yes, to answer your question. So, yeah, I mean, whatever regulations the state's going to have is going to have to be done regardless of what we would say. Yeah.
So in essence, if there's oil and hydraulic fluid and those kind of things seeping into the ground, it probably is against some state regulation.
That's correct. Those are things they should mitigate, yes,
And
sir.
they come out periodically and do it.
I don't know how exactly they do that, but you would think they would, yeah.
So it is looked into and it is covered?
Yes, yeah, this would, again, that's regardless, they would have to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions, just general questions, learning curve for me. Can we, or what can we do if we want to look at the idea of changing zoning or our approval for a minimum of 1 acre lots?
Well, as of right now, the zoning ordinance, we have two primary residential zones. Okay, that's residential medium density and residential low density. The medium density is what you typically see, 3 units an acre. The residential low density is a 1 acre, 1 unit per acre zone. So there already is a minimum lot size of an acre in the RL zone. When you look at the zoning map, it's the unincorporated area is basically broken down. It's almost half residential medium density, half residential low density. Of course, there's some commercial, non-residential zones sprinkled in there, but over 90% of the county is zoned, of the unincorporated area is zoned for residential purposes, roughly half and half. If you wanted to zone the entire county residential unincorporated area for 1 unit acre, with our current ordinance, you'd be looking at, it'd be a rezoning of property, which would have to be done through this same process that we're doing right now.
What about stipulations for before approving developments to go in, these large neighborhoods coming in one right after the other, and as we keep getting reminded, we don't have space in schools. So what if you see a proposal for 800 homes, but we don't have enough seats in the schools, that we have to delay, tell them, no, it cannot go in at this time because we don't have.
Well, what you're talking about is what some areas outside of Tennessee would call concurrency. Making sure there's concurrency, they call it. Florida, it was big in that. I don't know if they still are, but one thing I will say, even with larger subdivisions, it's not that you approve a subdivision and then the next day you have 800 homes. That kind of development takes several years to get to that level, which does allow the schools.
The school and funding.
Right, it allows some time. There's a little bit of overlap in there. Again, you're not going to have 800 homes just drop down 6 months after you get a subdivision approval. But, I mean, there is the ability, I don't know so much about school capacity and things like that, but we do look at things like, traffic studies for road capacity. We do look at drainage issues when we look at subdivisions. We do look at water and sewer capacity, those kind of things. I mean, you could lump that into those kind. We'd have to do a little bit of research into how that would work, because that fluctuates. School attendance can fluctuate even by the day in some schools, especially if there's a rezoning done. So if you had a developer that brought in a school and, on the first day, there was no capacity to do it, then let's say a rezoning plan came through, or just through the natural fluctuation, it lost a little bit of attendance, all of a sudden now it is, there's a lot that needs to be thought about for using that kind of a metric, but in some places that is something that they do consider.
But you currently don't look at that as far as in your process?
Not as far as school attendance and capacity in the schools, no. There's nothing in our regulations about that right now.
Well, for me, it kind of looks like something that might need to kind of at least do a study and a look at for a future. It's kind of the idea of putting the infrastructure in place, the turning lane, when you can estimate each house is going to have an average of 2 cars.
Sure.
It's the kind of, you can project a certain number of potential students to come in that region. It would be a good idea, especially in my area, to start looking at that if it's not already too late for us. But as the county continues to grow and we don't have a lot of ways to pay for it, it'd be nice to know that all departments are talking on an equal basis for all the infrastructure we need.
And I will say, the reports that I make for the subdivision inventories, I send those reports to the central schools office. So they're getting that same information as far as available lots that you all are getting here. I send that to them every month. So we do have an open communication with them. Whenever we see larger, especially planned developments, I'll send them the pattern books and everything for their review and comment, just to see what concerns they've got.
I'm just thinking of trying to find a way that if we have to say no, but not hurt growth, but at the same time say no when we can't. Once that's approved and that's once approved, we have no way to carry on the
No, yeah,
back
I
end.
understand what you're saying.
So I'm just trying to have some kind of balance of a equation a little bit more, and that seems like a viable option. So I'd like to see some kind of thing in the future where we can start looking at that study to at least a more realistic heads up of what potential could come through.
Yes.
Smart question. Anything else for Doug? Doug, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 7, Tanya Bell, building codes.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman, Mayor Carr.
Good evening.
All right, I'm going to do a quick recap of fiscal year 22-23 real fast because we didn't have a meeting last month, just to go over some real generic numbers. In 22-23 fiscal year 22-23, we issued a total of 4,112 permits, as opposed to 4,088 the year before. Of those 4,112, 944 of those were single-family dwellings. As far as the development tax and the school facilities tax goes, in fiscal year 22-23, the total collection was $5,953,747.50, as opposed to the year before, which was $5,485,931.70. Anybody have any questions on that before I move on to July's numbers?
Continue on.
Okay. For the month of July, building codes issued a total of 320 permits. Of those 320, 76 of those were single-family dwellings, for a total revenue of $200,848.20. Development tax and school facilities tax was a total of it's $569,957. $563,207 of that was SFT, and then $6,750 was development tax. Questions on that? No? Okay. And our zoning enforcement, we had a total of 195 inspections for the month of July. And I apologize, I don't have June's, forgot it. That concludes my report.
Let me go with Commissioner James.
Can you go back to the first part, those two numbers last year and the year before, the difference?
For permits or school facilities tax?
The very beginning, the numbers, the 9 and 500.
The permits?
And whoops. I'm trying to figure out what caused the big difference, such the big change. That's what
The big difference in what? In permit issuance?
Yeah. Or You'll go to Mr. P. Let me kind of formulate my thought around that one.
Okay.
Just had a quick question or two about the tornado damage. I've noticed over on Rezoning Street on the Rutherford County side, there are at least 3 new structures going back to replace houses that were completely destroyed. And there's another one a friend of mine owns over on John Bragg Highway that's under construction. Are we taking care of those folks as far as not charging them our fees that we would normally charge? And I know we've been doing it on some of them because I've checked, but I'm curious about the plumbing and electrical fees, if they're being charged for those. I know our what used to be $1,500, it's $1 a square foot now, is being waived, if I'm not mistaken. But if
That's
you
correct.
would explain that.
Yes. Anytime we have a tornado or natural disaster or an event that comes through Rutherford County, if there's any reconstruction as a result of a natural event, we typically do it free of charge. This year, as a result of the Rezoning tornado, we have about 18 permits that were issued, a combination of single-family dwellings and accessory structures, and we did those free of charge for the property owners, in addition to the plumbing, any mechanical, gas. Electrical is done through the state of Tennessee, so I don't have any authority over waiving the fees on those, but everything that we were responsible for, the fees were waived.
Okay, and the reason I brought this up is I'd contacted some of these folks that called me and said, hey, you know, we're trying to rebuild and we're having trouble, and they didn't know that these fees were waived. But anyway, I want to tell you that I appreciate your help with those folks again, and so y'all did a good job of explaining that. Now, I wanted other people to hear that too, being televised, so that they would know if they had any questions about those fees and how they be waived. And I assume that would be even for remodeling, where you had to go in and say replace a roof or part of your structure. It's not just the entire building. So
Anything they're repairing back to original state, and all the fees are waived. And I know there was one that got by us, that slipped by, that the property owner called in, and we did give them a refund for their permit.
Opened your comments, you had cumulative numbers for all of July. You updated us on, I think it was the school facilities tax. You gave a grand total and then compared it to the previous year. Was that the number you were? Can you repeat those numbers?
Was it for the entire year? So for the entire fiscal year of 22-23, development tax and school facilities tax combined, the total was $5,953,747.50. And if you need that broken down between SFT and development tax, I can do that.
You compared that to the other year. What was the other year?
The previous year, so 21-22, was $5,485,931.70. And again, I can break those down for you if you need to, between school facilities tax and development tax.
I'm just wondering what the big difference in that, the $500,000 changeover.
Between the 5.9 million and the 5.4 million, well, the permit history, we did 944 single-family dwellings in 22-23 and only 895 in 21-22. So the difference would have been in the single-family dwelling permits.
Okay. It popped out on me. It was more of a question in my head, and bear with me. And the first time in 12 years, work changed my schedule, and this week was the first week of it. So I'm burning candle at both ends right now. So I'm kind of just in that slow. So when I saw such a big difference in the number, I was trying to look at it, but now I'm realizing what the number, where they're coming from, what the different permits, the taxes.
Right, and so the school facilities tax, bear in mind the school facilities tax is not just unincorporated Rutherford County. So the $500,000 difference is not just the permit difference in Rutherford County, because we collect school facilities tax for the cities of Murfreesboro, Smyrna, and Laverne. So I'm not sure if they've seen the same trend that we did, whether there was a little increase last year as opposed to the year before, but certainly the development tax or the school facilities tax numbers would indicate that.
Did it help?
I'm good. It just, my initial part, I missed something at the very beginning, and then I had to go through that rabbit hole to get the same information she said from the very beginning. So that's, I had lost myself one, and I apologize for that.
I tend to talk too fast. You just need to tell me to slow down. Say, Tanya, slow down.
Oh.
I didn't get that.
But if there's no other questions, I move to approve the report.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. And we have a second from Vice Chair Piercy. Any other questions? All those in favor of approving those reports? Any opposed? Tanya, thank you. Do you have anything else for us?
I do not. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Doug, don't leave. We have a question for you coming up in a different item. All right. Next item is item number 8, a transfer station motion. We have heard plenty tonight regarding the transfer station. As you know, in months past, this committee has voted and moved forward to budget, which then moved forward to full commission. All 3 of those committees, or 2 committees plus the full commission, favorably approved the building of a transfer station. So tonight, I am seeking a recommendation to move forward to budget, and then to final consideration to the full Board of Commissioners, the approval of the bond in which that service has already been, the service of that bond is in this year's current budget, to construct that transfer station. And the word a minute ago used was part of the strategy to manage our a municipal solid waste constitutional obligation. So I need that, I'm going to call on Steve Piercy for that motion, and then we will be happy to enter into discussion about that.
Chairman Cush, we have studied and viewed and watched multiple solutions for our trash. Nothing has really got an end use. The transfer station gives us a way out if we fall into a trap of nowhere to carry our trash. I'd like to make the motion that we move forward with the $20 million going to the bond. This issue, I'm sure, will need to go to budget and then go to the full commission for final approval. But I will make the motion that we start this ball rolling.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Piercy. So we have a motion to move forward with the bond. Do we have a second on that?
A second for discussion.
We have a second for Anthony Johnson. All right, let's open that up for discussion. Any questions? Chairman P.
Well, I've got several, and I agree with Commissioner Piercy, and he and I were some of the original ones that have had a problem with BFI, especially since it kind of borders both of our districts. In his district, most of the wind kind of blows it into my district, a little more out of his. But at any rate, I've got a couple of problems with going ahead with this today, and here's what the problems are. One, I've asked for a financial report on this after talking to Mr. Wagner. I haven't received that. I'd like to dig into the finances on this a little bit closer so I know exactly what I'm getting for my money. Two, there's been a lot of discussion on how long this transfer station is or how soon we would need it. I've seen a report from BFI, and I've seen which is basically Republic, and also TDEC, and also from an independent engineering service that says there's 5.5 years left, almost 6. Now, that's not to say we don't need to go ahead and do something, but I want to know the finances on this before I'm willing to say, yes, I'm all in favor of this. Two, I'm getting conflicting reports. I mentioned this to Chairman Cush earlier about an offer that Murfreesboro City has made for us to use their transfer station. Now, the story that I'm getting is that it would be of no cost to us to use their transfer station, and we use it as we see fit. I'm just telling you how I'm hearing the story. And if that's the case, I want to look into it. I think they should come here and report to this committee and tell us exactly what they would expect in return for that, and how free we would have use of that facility. If that's the case, maybe we need to partner with them. But until I see, I've heard also that we would be paying for half of it. Like I said, I don't know, and I don't think anybody sitting here probably knows, unless they've had discussions that I hadn't had or heard of. But anyway, I've got a problem with going ahead and financing this until I get the financial details. I've asked for them a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't got them yet. So until I get them, I'm not willing to say, yeah, I'm ready to finance this. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I think that we do need to have a plan B, and this is a good plan B. But I'm not so sure that I need to do it right now. And we just got through with a 26-cent tax increase. And you're throwing another $20 million, $20 million onto our debt. And personally, I'm not planning on voting for another tax increase for quite a while. If ever, I'd like to come up with some solutions to change that, and I know the mayor would. We all would. Those are some of the questions that I've got. I want some answers on the finances. I've asked for them, I hadn't got them. I'd like to have some answers from Murfreesboro City on what they're offering specifically, and I think they should come report to this committee if that's the case. And two, I don't think that it's a deadline for us because we're looking at 5.5 years. I don't want to stretch it past another 6, 8 months. I think we can probably get that information before the end of the year and make this decision. So I'm not saying put this off for a long period. Matter of fact, I don't want to put it off for a long period of time, but I want the information first.
Chairman P., may I ask what kind of financial information specifically you're looking for?
I have told Bishop what I was looking for, and I'd just soon not discuss it.
Okay. Commissioner James.
I respect what you're getting at, Commissioner P. I disagree with parts of it, and I would argue against waiting for anything to do with Murfreesboro. And nothing against Murfreesboro or anything on that. It's just the idea of the unknown. I like the idea of hedging our bets, having something ready to go, ready to act, and be ready for it. Now, I didn't vote for this tax increase this year because I found, after looking at the budgets, I found that the biggest problem was the commission, our body, was appropriating too much money, too many funds. Now, however, part of this, and that did go through, that budget increase did go through, and part of that was with this in mind, knowing that this was right here at the cusp, ready to go. I'm in favor of funding it and building it so that we have something. We're reliant on numbers and dates that we don't know for certain. We can believe public, we can believe our solid waste director, we can believe anybody who wants to tell us. But I'd rather us go ahead and be prepared to act and begin to act and build this facility that will affect the entire county than the potential risk of a 2-year build out once we find out that nobody's taking our trash. So everybody in the county can have their trash in their driveway for 2 years while we're building it out then. Not to mention what we've already gone through now the last few months to get all the permits processed, everything ready to go. I feel like any potential delay on that would do more harm to us than anything. So whether we move forward later and continue a portion of our fees with Murfreesboro at a later date, that's another discussion later. If we were to continue a relationship with the Republic at a later date, that's another discussion later. Right now we have to have some kind of, in my opinion, some kind of cards in our hand at the table.
So my understanding is that you're in favor, and has always been in favor of a transfer station, but you're not willing to raise the taxes to pay for it, but yet you're happy to do this.
Well, if we want to argue with that, another vote I didn't pay for or choose to go on was the $156 million for the school additions. That was, with that taken out of that increase, that alone, those appropriations would have balanced our budget within a 4% margin. So if we hadn't done that, then with this and some other projects, we still would have been fine within that same margin of a 4% balanced budget. So it's not just this, and this is really a small portion of what you're asking, what you're saying. But this affects every resident in the county. And then if we sign on and wait to sign on with whatever deal we get with Murfreesboro, and again, nothing matter with Murfreesboro might turn out to be a really good deal for us, but if we wait for that moment, then we have the potential of harming everybody in the county, or we're at the very least at the whims of another entity telling us when and what we can and cannot use, and if they want to change their mind and charge us something different, when we can take control, which is what my understanding the transfer station is about, is having control for our own future.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, your question's the same question I've got, and that's why I said we need to ask Murfreesboro City to come here and tell us exactly what they had in mind and what they're planning on using. As far as the other argument about our schools, we'd have about 1,200 students without a place to sit. It's why we voted, some of us that voted for that tax increase did. But we'll argue that at another time. But again, I want to see what this is going to cost us. I think it's responsible to find out what the cost is. And I think it's also responsible if somebody's offering to build one for us, that we ought to at least say, Well, exactly what do you mean by you're going to build it for us? It's not going to cost us anything. That's what I'm hearing. If that's the case, what I want to spend $15–20 million, if they're going to give me one.
I'd be really curious, hold on, Anthony, I'd be really curious as to who told you that. Because we have said, as your chairman and the mayor, this mayor and the previous mayor, have sit with the leadership of the city, and nobody said they're building anything for free. They wanted us to participate financially on the Butler Road transfer station, and then when we decided to build a north transfer station, they would help us financially on that. Nothing was ever mentioned for free, so I'd like to know who at the city's telling you that.
Well, that's why I want them to come here and talk to us straight up.
So you will not tell me who's telling you they're going to do it for free?
I won't do it on air, but yes, I will afterwards.
Okay. And we have also sat down with the leadership of the city multiple times since November of last year about a partnership. And we have said, we'd be happy to talk to you. But part of the thing about the transfer station is we need to control the transfer station. That's our equipment running in and out. We need to have control of the gate. We need to have access, full access. They said, we're not so sure about that. And after that, the talks have ceased. So,
Chairman, I agree with you 100%.
Then why would you want to stall?
I'm not trying to stall. I'm trying to get them to come here to explain what it is. If they want to give us something that's going to cost us $15–20 million, why would we not look at that for a month? Is stalling this for a month going to hurt us?
I'll tell you why, Chairman. Because we, Rutherford County, have a constitutional obligation to move municipal solid waste trash. The city of Murfreesboro does not. If they want to call tomorrow and say, we're going to stop picking up everybody's trash in the city, they can do that. They're doing it for fun. We have to do it by law. They can back out anytime they want. So I could give a rat's, you know what the city wants to do, because they don't have a skin in the game. We do. And I'm telling you, we've had the city attorney, the city mayor, the assistant director of solid waste sit in our group and tell us what they are and aren't going to do. And if they do anything, our transfer station is going to be open for business before they stick a shovel in the ground. Now, whether we need that transfer station in 2 years or 5 years, you know how long 5 years passes in our lifetime? The snap of a dadgum finger. So I'm disappointed that you want to get a player that's not really invested in the game to wait for a decision for them, for us as the leader. We are the leader. I'm disappointed. I'm truly disappointed. I understand your financial part, but to sit for somebody who's doing it for fun and doesn't have skin in the game doesn't sit well. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Commissioner P. And I see we got hung up on whether something's free or not, but that wasn't the main point. Point is, we've had 1 or 2 commissioners and our mayor to meet many times and hashing all this out. There are 21 of us up here, 21 commissioners that were hired to do the same job. And I know everybody can't be in the initial discussions, but sometime or another, the whole commission, whether it be by executive session, we need to be brought in, because I understand we've been told, well, we don't want to let everything out to the public because that can mess up our whole deal. I understand that, because there are entities that, well, I don't want to go too far with that, but we could have executive session.
Commissioner Johnson, we can't, because if we were an executive commission and talked about this, we would be in deliberation. and that is against the law. That is the beauty of county government. So you have to trust. You have to
I'm
trust.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, you misunderstood what I'm saying.
Okay.
Executive session for information that Commissioner P. and I have asked for, basically a business plan. If we were going to do this with anybody else, we're bringing in a company to do business for us. We're going to ask for that business plan. What are you going to do? What are you going to bring in? What's it going to cost us? What's it going to save us? Because I know we're not going to we can't get into the business of making money, but we can save money. And down the road, we wouldn't have to raise the property tax again, hopefully, or at least not as often. But we need a business plan pro forma. Is that the word?
Yeah, it is.
I think we need that so all of us commissioners know exactly what we're voting on. I know, yes, we need the transfer station at some point, but we also need this information to make the right choice.
Did the mayor not do that with you already? Lay out a business plan?
Several of us commissioners met individually with the mayor, yes, and Director.
If I may, I met with every member of this committee in my office by appointment to go over that particular plan, every member of this committee individually. And I gave you specific numbers based on data that was not the research that I did, but was performed by an independent engineer who has experience in the operation of a transfer station.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
If I could finish just for a quick.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I yielded to you, but what you're saying is not exactly the way it went down. I was taking notes because you didn't give me any information. You were telling me, you were reading me information.
That's correct.
I was writing, and I was writing down, I was understanding everything you were telling me.
That's correct.
But that was short term. You told me, quit writing, I will get you this information. That didn't happen.
Well, then I failed to follow up with that, but and I will.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I
None
guess
of the rest of this commission has that information either, and we need that information. And I'm not saying we need to not do the transfer station, but we need that information. We need to be educated on what this is going to cost us or what it's going to save us, so we make the right decision. I was in on the decision to start this so-called mess or the wrong decision way back when it was done, this first contract. But I won't sit here tonight and tell you it was a bad contract. It was a good contract for the day, and this transfer station's needed, and it will be good for this county at a certain point. But I can't vote to send this through to the bond, to do the bond on it without this information of what it's going to cost us. I wouldn't do that, like I said, if we were doing business with somebody else coming in here presenting the transfer station. We would require them to tell us everything about it, all the ins and outs. And if we can't discuss it here, which I'm not trying to do that tonight, I'm saying we can have executive session with the county commission, and I know it costs, but the thing is, if we make the wrong decision, it'll cost us a whole lot more than that executive session. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not sure how long it would put it off, but it's not going to put it off for years. It can be done quickly.
Well, if I may, the challenge is, Michael, and you may want to chime in here, is that you need to go to the bond market for the 3 schools, correct? Can you explain that calendar for the committee as to why the timing of this is important? Thank you.
So we are running out of time, so I put off going to the bond market as long as we could. So we have set a schedule now, a draft schedule to go to the bond market for this bond issue, and mainly what's driving this is the schools, because when this commission approved that, I believe it was $156 million for the 3 high school additions at the time. We did a bond anticipation note of $35 million. And we have issued that, so that has been issued for several months. But we're running out of time, that cash flow wise. You know, $154 million, we only had $35 million to float us for several months. So with that being said, is part of putting on a county project onto the schools has a mandatory 20-day waiting period of public comment. A protest period is what it's called. And so we've constructed a timeline, and even if going to the bond market with this timeline, we still would not get our final funds until the first or second week of October. And that is with moving to budget, I believe that's Thursday night for the schools. So if we wanted to attach a project on, like the transfer station, I can't put this off, the bond market I can't put off for the schools because we'll run out of money, cash. And so that's, I believe, the schedule the mayor's referring to as far as the bond market schedule.
Michael, we could go to the bond market for the schools. Could we not turn around later in the year and go again to the bond market for this?
Yes. I mean, you definitely could. I think one of the things would have been the trying to save on the closing cost. I think was the trying to attach it on here.
And
yes, we definitely
I agree
can.
with that. I'm not trying to delay this other than, 30 days, let them come back to our committee. And I already got the financing statements that I'd asked for. I probably wouldn't be making, half of these asks that I'm asking tonight. But, when I talk to somebody, I expect to get what I'm asking for. And when I ask for the finances on something like that, I want them.
Well, for me, when I had the meeting, I got the numbers in real time during the meeting, those numbers. So that's what I'm down. They're rounded, they're rough numbers, but I got those numbers. That's why I'm looking at it the way I am. So I can respect you for not getting, but I know I got them in the meeting.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. What numbers did you get?
Just the rough numbers for this transfer station, for the need, for the build out, for the equipment, for the projected, with the margin for the fluctuation for the bids.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
so I'm not trying to withhold any information from anybody on any topic, most especially this. But I was trying to be discreet because our comments are public. And so I did, Commissioner Johnston, tell you that I was going to follow up with those numbers and send those to you. Your recollection of our meeting is not inaccurate. It is correct. My apologies for not following up. I said I would, and I didn't. And I probably, as I'm sitting here listening to that conversation, I probably failed to do that with everybody. And again, my apologies. That was not intentional. Having said that, I so fervently and passionately believe in not only that we're supposed to do this and do this now for the health of our community, and as much as I don't want to, because timing is critical, as Mr. Smith has laid out. I am willing to discuss in as great a detail as necessary tonight the finances and the business plan associated with this facility in an effort to move it forward. I'm not trying to hide anything from this committee. I'm just trying to be discreet. But at this juncture, I think we have no choice but to try to move forward. And if discussing the details requires that, Mr. Chairman?
I would be happy to, but I would like to make one exception. We have a $20 million number out there that the bond is. We have our construction estimate in from HNA, and it is, and I will say this publicly, it is somewhere a little south of $20 million. But that's all I want to talk about in terms of what the construction estimate is. Why do I want to keep that quiet? Because those bidders who will be bidding on this project don't need to hear what our construction estimate is. Because if we say it's $19.5 million, they're going to come in with bids of $19.5 million, right? So we're going to keep that part quiet. But Mayor, you may continue with some of the operational costs and
Yes.
other associated costs with the...
To the extent that I can answer Chairman P's questions, because you specifically had some concerns about the operational costs, and Chairman Johnson's questions or anybody else, I'll be glad to answer those in an effort to move this forward. Again, I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm just trying to be discreet.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Chairman.
I had similar questions to what Commissioner P said, but maybe in a little different way. The Forensic Center was a topic of conversation at our last Property Management Committee meeting, and the discussion there was that we don't have enough information, operational cost for that, and what it's going to cost going forward. So that was kind of delayed a month or so. We had similar situations come up with the public safety buildings. Before we commit to building those, what are our operational costs or what it's going to cost the county, not only next year but the year after that. That's the type of questions that I had in my mind, is that the operational costs, what's it going to cost to run that thing year after year, and then the additional cost of handling that garbage, and where is that garbage going to go, and what is the cost to the county? That's what's running around in my mind. Not building it, but what is it going to cost us to operate that? If we send our garbage someplace else, there could be potential revenue coming into the county, but there also could be some potential cost to the county as years go by, service that we're getting free right now. So those were the thoughts that were in my mind. What's it going to cost to run that thing? And then is there additional cost for us to dispose of that garbage? Once again, we're getting those in essence free right now, and it depends on who you believe, okay? And I've read the report several times about life of the landfill, and I know there's a dispute on that. But in my heart of hearts, I believe there's 5 years left of that landfill. So that's my question. If we have to have it right now, I want to know when that thing is built and it's operational, what's it going to cost the county, and how are we going to pay for that because it will be a budgetary increase in my mind.
It will, most certainly, and we've accounted for that. Mr. Chairman, I have my notes down in my office. If you'll excuse me for like 2 minutes to get my notes, I'll be glad to, because I want to make sure I don't recall them from memory, but I have my notes in front of me, if that's okay.
If you'll make it 5 minutes, I'll expand that to a trip down the hallway.
Okay, that sounds good. We will take a 5-minute recess, if that's all right. Mayor, you have the floor. Oh, yes, sir. Robert, go ahead.
I interject something right quick. I had a quick discussion with Bishop, and I want to correct something that I said. Bishop and I have communicated specifically about the numbers that we're talking about. And by my mistake, I thought that I'd asked Bishop to report back to me and tell me what these numbers were. I actually asked him to talk to Michael and find out what those numbers were. So I apologize. I mean, Bishop's straight up guy. He's not doing anything behind anybody's back or anything like that. And this is something, but I just wanted to make that clear. That was my mistake. I had contacted him after a meeting we had and said, hey, where'd these numbers come from? So that's.
Thank you for that clarification. And you are no longer under the bus, Bishop. So.
That's good to know, Chairman.
All right.
So let me just start off with some basic numbers. And if it's all right, Mr. Chairman, we'll just take the questions as they come. and I'll do my very best to answer them. So the facility proposed, Dan, give me a nod or a no if I'm close. The approximate size of the facility is 12,000 square feet under roof. Is that accurate? That's correct. Okay. And with an operational capacity of about 1,285 tons per day or 450,000 tons per year. Is that correct? 360? Okay, thank you very much. That was my math, so that's why I'm asking. So we're looking at 360,000 tons capacity a year. The Murfreesboro facility, which was referenced earlier, I have spoken most recently to the city manager of Murfreesboro just this past Saturday in a lengthy conversation. So I have been encouraged by members of this committee and members of the commission to be in constant contact and negotiation with the city of Murfreesboro about how we can create synergies for our entire community about solving the solid waste issue. We are constantly doing that. That is, we have as a matter of fact, from my point of view, we have an excellent relationship. And so I spent almost an hour on the phone with Craig Tyndall on Saturday, large part, talking about this very issue. They are running into, not unexpectedly, but they're running into some issues and challenges about moving forward in the way that they want to have their what's called a two-pronged approach. It's both a transfer station and a waste-to-waste solution. They are moving forward with both, but they're on an accelerated schedule with the transfer station as opposed to the waste-to-waste solution. And there's some bonding issues associated with that I'm not real familiar with because I'm not involved in it, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's their intent to still do both. But to be quite honestly, they haven't done any geotechnical out there. They haven't got a plat. They haven't got a facility yet designed. And so to that point, Rutherford County is a little ahead of the curve as far as meeting that criteria. Secondly, and most importantly, Chairman Cush is absolutely correct. The statutory obligation to deal with Rutherford County solid waste resides with Rutherford County, not the city of Murfreesboro. So if the city of Murfreesboro elects to get out of the trash pickup business, they most certainly can. And just like Smyrna and Laverne could get into it, they have chosen not to, so it's our responsibility. There's approximately about 460,000 tons of waste produced in Rutherford County every year. That's both MSW's, municipal solid waste, and C&D. 20% of that is C&D, okay? And that's probably where I got my 460 a minute ago. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve for Rutherford County's municipal solid waste primarily, but hopefully C&D. And even if Rutherford County and Murfreesboro come online, it will require both facilities to do so, because Murfreesboro's capacity with the waste-to-waste solution is only 140,000 tons a year. That leaves another 320,000 tons that are going to have to be dealt with. And we have that statutory obligation. So these were the numbers. Dan, Bishop, y'all chime in. These are the numbers that we started to work with when developing the size of this facility, was how do we deal with the remainder of that which Murfreesboro wasn't going to obligate themselves to. The 12,000 square foot building, we anticipate operating costs of will be less than $1.3 million a year. That's 5 employees, that's fuel costs, that's, let's see, let me get to my spreadsheet here. That's dealing with the leachate, that's engineering environmental reports, and it does not include the retirement or the bond debt. So it's the $1.3 million is just to service the facility at a capacity of 200,000 tons per year. So the target we laid down was 200,000 tons per year, 5 employees, and that includes 2 guys in the yard, somebody at the scale, a manager, and a wheel loader operator. Am I saying that right, Bishop? So that's the cost to operate.
That's based on 300 operating days a year, as I recall.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct. 300 operating days a year. So what we're looking at is how does this facility pay for itself? Well, I did some calling around, and I found out that there are several transfer stations in the Middle Tennessee State community, Middle Tennessee State area, and there's one in particular in Williamson County run by the former solid waste manager for Rutherford County. And all this is public information, but Mr. Mac Nolan, who operates the Williamson County facility, tells me that they have their trash removed from Williamson County at a rate of less than $50 a ton. The current tip fee at the gate at Republic is $110 a ton. That's the gate fee as I understand it. Bishop, am I saying that correctly? But it's close. It could be 100. But so the fact of the matter is there is, in my estimation, in that gross profit spread, the availability for Rutherford County to mitigate the cost associated with dealing with its landfill waste. Questions?
Your numbers were based on 200,000 tons per year.
Correct.
And Williamson County shared with you that their cost to transfer out of their station was somewhere less than $50 per ton.
So to be exact, Mac told me $47 to $48 a ton, including a fuel surcharge. That fuel surcharge kind of goes up and down, Chairman Dodd, and that's why I use the $50 number to be most conservative. Does that make sense?
About 9.6 million. I use 48.50 or something, but $9 or $10 million to transport out of the station if we had to carry it out of the county.
At $200,000 a ton.
200,000
At
tons.
$50 a ton. That is
million.
correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Where does Williamson County take their?
My understanding of their trash is hauled by Waste Management to Camden, Tennessee. Yes, sir, Chairman Phillips. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've kind of...
Yes, you
My apologies, I am not the chairman.
You take over.
No, I am not taking over.
So the thought process here is that from the Rutherford County transfer station, we would haul our garbage to someplace other than Republic in Rutherford County. Is that what I'm hearing?
I did not say that.
No, we did not say that. What could happen, let me emphasize could. Did you all hear me? Could. If you wanted to make money, there are a lot of hired haulers within the county. There's a lot of county trash that does not go to Middle Point. If we chose to seek those low-hanging fruits, we could take that revenue and take that trash and haul it elsewhere for a tipping fee that would be revenue, acquired revenue. Our trash would still go to Middle Point because we are not interfering with their our contract. We are not taking business away from them. It's business they're not getting right now anyway. could pay for the operational costs pretty easily. And again, I like the term that was used a minute ago, this is part of the strategy. This would, we don't want to continue to haul trash out of the county somewhere else. This is a plan B until we find a technology that we can use to turn trash into something useful, an energy, a fuel, you name it, and not being caveman and burying it in the ground any longer. But we all know this committee sat here for 4 years interviewing different technologies. We have not found one that has been a success that we want to hang our hat with. They would all like us to be the guinea pig, but we have not found one, at least in my opinion, that has proven to be successful and viable.
May I ask a question
Chairman Dodge, yes, sir. Please
Michael
do.
Smith?
Please do.
So if we go to the market for $20 million is the ask to the bond market with this next go-around, might we, if we delayed that, what might the closing cost be if we did it a year from now or 6 months from now? Or
I mean, it could definitely be in the a few $100,000 range, pretty easily.
So we might say we'll save 6 figures if we borrow the money this go around.
I can't
by reducing our closing
I can't
cost.
tell you exactly what you would save or not save because we haven't went to bid yet because a bond is competitively bid. The underwriter's discount we estimate pretty conservatively, but yes, you could save north of 6 figures. Yes. I don't feel comfortable giving an exact dollar amount because I won't know until September 27th until the bond sale. But yes, a lot of the issuances are based on percentages, and then we have some that are flat fees that we would pay. So we would definitely save those flat fees, but then depending on what the percentage is now versus what the percentage would be then, yes, it could definitely be in the 6-figure range when you're talking this much money.
And secondly, if we borrow the 20, two things. Do we start paying interest as soon as is cash deposited in our bank after the bond sale? Is it deposited? Do we pay interest immediately? And thirdly, while it's sitting there, can Dept be drawing income from it?
So yes, a couple things. Yes, it's not deposited immediately. There is a lag there, but ultimately, yes, the $20 million would come into our account within, I think, the first week of October for this. And then depending on how we bid the bond and structure, which we're still working on, would depend on when it starts accruing interest immediately, I'll say that. Now, depending on when we pay it, we try to strive for level debt service. But ultimately, to answer your question is, yes, Dept's office would invest that money. And we would have to, right now, we're having to watch arbitrage really close. Because we're not allowed to make over the true interest cost of the bond based on the calculation, but we can make up to it. And so I will tell you right now, the bulk of our money is earning 4.9% or more. And I anticipate our true interest cost on this bond to be much less. But this bond won't be structured necessarily like your house mortgage. We could pay 5% interest on the first 5 years of the bond, and we could pay 2% on the last years. So what we care about is our true interest cost. But I will tell you, right now we have, I believe Dept has it over $150 million, making 5.5% or more. So I do feel like we could make our interest costs back on the $20 million. And yes, it would be deposited up front. It's not a draw.
I have struggled with this. Just do we do it now? Do we do it later? And all that. Same discomfort some of the other guys have had. But for 6 years, we've been discussing this is the first best step in all the technology or all the choices we've looked at. Mike and I have been on this topic for 6 years now. So transfer station is the first move, is logical. We have done engineering up front, so I think we have some professional guidance on cost of the building, unlike other decisions that have come before us. I wasn't prepared for forensics, but to me, this one's had a 6-year track record. It's had professional guidance on cost. We'll discuss the roadway here next. And so I think this was further along than other items we've asked to rush. So I'm becoming more comfortable with this, and with Mike's comments, if we act now, we'll have an even better understanding of our cost before we pull a trigger on building the building. Like we have an RFQ coming up, I believe the gentleman shared with us. We have an actual bid package is what I meant to say. So I'm becoming more comfortable with this. I think now is the time to act as opposed to waiting.
I want to be absolutely crystal clear. We have a bid package on the site work, okay? And we will receive a bid package on the structural work in about 4 to 6 weeks. So we're doing this in 2 phases, the site work and the structural. I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
It just doesn't feel like as much of a rush as, so I just wanted to share that. I had my discomfort of rushing now versus waiting a few months. I think I'm more comfortable that we could do this now, cover our interest costs for a period of time while we're working out some items, and this isn't rash because we've been discussing it and planning it and devising the best plan of action for 6 years. So thanks for y'all's patience with me. I just want to say I'm getting comfortable with this now versus later.
Questions? Comments? Motions? Oh, yeah, we do. I'm sorry. It's been a minute.
But I do have a comment. We used to stand up to speak.
Yes, we did.
Remember? We've fought this forever. I've been here 9 years, and we've talked, and we've kicked it, and we've asked questions, and we've run across the what-ifs, and maybe not, and let's wait. Gentlemen, I was at the Republic landfill site Sunday afternoon. And of course, I go quite often. It's a nice place to get a view sometimes. Depends on what you call a nice view. But I looked at the site they've been filling on for probably a year and a half. It was deep when they started. Today, it's level with the rest of it. When you start grading back for your final grade, you're full. That site is all but full up. I've watched them fill it. They're waiting on an expansion or a gift from this county for the V. That's the only way they can stay, unless they opt to build their transfer station out front and keep taking Nashville's trash into Walter Hill and truck it to another landfill. It's pretty simple. Sooner or later, it's going to fill up. You can believe what they tell you, or you can go look. You can keep up with it and watch it. I've listened to several stories. I'm not saying they're not telling the truth, but I don't think I've heard all the truth. That's what I base my facts on when I listen to Republic Landfill. They're good people. I like them. I have nothing against the people down there. But I despise what they have done to my district for the Walter Hill community. It's a shame to drive through that community and see the mud on the streets, the mud on the church fences, trash in the fence rows. They'll clean at it. They won't clean it up. It's not been too long ago I was going down the Jefferson Pike right in front of Republic. They had a crew out there with a machine scraping the ground, sweeping the road. Down at the little covered bridge where it had got so deep, they had a crew there with shovels and brooms, scooping it up, throwing it in the branch. Now what does that tell you? That branch runs into our river, that river runs into everybody's drinking water just about in this county. It's time we put all our petty differences between each other and done something right for this county. and approved the motion I made to move forward. We don't question how we're going to pay for a school bond. We built it. And then we sit here and sweat it out on the budget committee. How are we going to pay for it? It's no time to worry about a $20 million bond for what this will do for Rutherford County. You're going to wake up one morning, and it's going to be like your mama caught you doing something wrong. They're going to spank your tail because you're not going to have nowhere to take your trash. You're going to have to keep it. This is a way to not have to keep it. Use this structure in the future for something else if something comes along, as one of the Republic gentlemen called the black box. He stood right here one night and told us if there was a black box out there for trash, they'd have it, in which I firmly believe that. They've got the money to get it. But this is our opportunity to move our 8-9 years of hard work forward. Don't keep us held back again, because we can always come in here and come up with some kind of reason. Let's wait. Well, we need more information on this. Well, let's wait on that. Now, I know we've got to pay the $20 million, Mr. P., but I'll sit on budget and I'll try to help you figure it out. But there's no need of holding this project back over a handful of information, or this one heard that one said, that one heard this one said. We'll still be here 10 years from now. Well, I won't be, but some of the newer people probably will be. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Since there is money involved, since this is a bond, we will go to a roll call vote. Carla? You have a second. Anthony Johnson made the second. Steve Piercy made the motion.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Chairman?
Yes. All right, that motion passes. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Yes.
just follow up.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I see your passion. I really see Commissioner Piercy's passion, but I didn't hear anyone here saying that they wanted to stop the transfer station. What I heard in here is people wanting a little bit more information as to what it's going to cost us to operate that transfer station. We got that information, and it made some of those null and void. So there's nobody, in my mind, wanting to stop that transfer station. But when we build a school, we know what it's going to cost us to operate that school year after year. We know all of that, and we were just asking for some of that same information. We got that information, and I think most of the commission or committee is willing to move forward. So to say that we were against that transfer station, Mr. Piercy.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Wait.
And so, to everyone's point, I will do a much better job of relaying the information that is necessary for you to make the informed vote that you're asking to make. And so I'll be reaching out to you very soon in that regard, because I do want to answer all your questions, every single one. And so if you have a question between now and any other time, let's set something up. Let's go back. I will get you the answer, and I will get you the source for that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
One more.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you mistook what I said as far as stopping it, but I've said on this committee about 8 to 9 years versus your 1 year, and I have watched all the information come through and all the questions be put out, and I've seen it hindered many times. And that was how I was referring to it being stopped, as being hindered. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on, professional service. This is just really a statement that I wanted to put on. for total transparency. We are also in a partnership with this transfer station. We'll be issuing a RFQ, professional services for design of landfill road modifications. And what I should have added to that, and I appreciate Mike Hughes for bringing that to my attention, this is really landfill road modifications, but more importantly, the Jefferson Pike interchange as it relates to Landfill Road. And Mike, you've sat here for hours, I think, just so you could show this picture. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. So now is your chance to show this picture.
Right. To handle the additional traffic that we'll see coming up and down Landfill Road, we're going to request that we have a westbound left turn lane added, a eastbound left turn lane for Antler Drive, but also right and left dedicated lanes coming out of here. But also what Chairman Cush had said, that we will need to make some safety improvements along Landfill Road. There's some curves that we'll need to kind of soften, and so we can make that a better situation for the transfer station.
Any questions on that? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay. Mike, since you've spent all this time, why don't you can you pull up the Wilson County Elementary School?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So while you're here, I'm just going to put you to work. All right. So if you will all recall, we did a timeout with Peary Construction on the convenience center construction on the Landfill Road site. Peary was nice enough to halt construction, continue his movement on the other convenience centers, and we have found a piece of property that we own on the Wilson Elementary School property on Angie Lane and Jefferson Pike. It is already zoned properly, zoned industrial, so there is no rezoning or public hearings needed other than just a site plan submitted to Doug. What I say, industrial? Institutional, place where I belong. Thank you, Doug. Institutional is the zoning currently. And we just want to chat about that tonight. And Michael, since you are here manning the mouse, will you show us that particular property and in relationship to the school?
Yes, Chairman. Whoops. Pardon. This is Wilson Elementary, and it fronts on Cutoff Road. And as you mentioned, there is a private drive, that Angie Drive, that goes from Jefferson Pike all the way past the school site to Cutoff Road. And we were looking at possibly utilizing 2.5, 3, maybe a little bit more acres down at this end of the school site.
So, Mike, as a county engineer, what is your take on this piece of property in terms of ingress, egress for the constituents, the public who will be using that convenience center? You think that's a smart idea?
Yes, sir. It's got great access on two frontages, Angie Drive and also Jefferson Pike as well. We have water available. There's good soils on the property. There is a septic system for the school that we could tap into, or we could utilize the soil on site to create our own septic system. So that it's it's got its advantages. There's also a pond at the opposite side of Angie Drive that we could increase a little bit to handle the additional runoff from the site. So there's all kinds of advantages to this property.
So you would give it a thumbs up in terms of the right place to be?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Mayor?
Yeah, I want to be sensitive also to the fact that this is an idea that I want us to kick around. But while I think the location's good, I want to be sensitive to the neighborhoods that are out there as well. And I would like, if we can we get Mr. DeMasi to come and speak and see how we go about doing some type of public hearing? Because I do think input from the citizens out there might be important, at least from an educational perspective. Mr. Chairman, can we have Mr. DeMasi come and say how we navigate that if we were to move forward with this location? Under no circumstances am I advocating this is a solution without getting that to community's input.
Yes, sir, thank you. I mean, you could go about this, I suppose, a couple different ways. As Chairman Cush stated, the property is zoned institutional. The use of a convenience center, government-operated convenience center, is what's classified as an essential service in our zoning ordinance, which is a use by right. So there's no public hearing, there's no zoning change that's necessary. Nothing would come before the county commission for that. Now, something that we require, say, of applicants for planned developments and even some conventionally zoned properties, a neighborhood meeting could be something that's offered. We could have a neighborhood meeting, maybe even at the school. You know, we could settle on a location and say this is kind of what the plan is. Talk about the advantages, disadvantages, and things like that. That would probably be the preferable route. Now, another route to go. Now, this would involve a little bit of more cost on the front end. Now that we have public comment periods at the beginning of all of our county meetings, since this is just a site plan, you could have it at the planning commission, the site plan, and then have the public comment period open during that time for comments to be made. But again, that would mean we'd have a site plan we'd be looking at. But if the idea is to get some input prior to going down that road, then a neighborhood meeting would probably be a better route.
Neighborhood meeting.
I think Mr. Piercy. Oh.
Gentlemen, this is in my district, and I went and looked at this site Sunday afternoon after enjoying my trip down to Republic Landfill, and had a little discussion with the mayor on the telephone over really who this property belongs to. If you'll see that's a house trailer where the gravel road comes in, yeah, right there. That's a house trailer. This lady says she owns 13 to 15 acres on this corner right here. The reason I'm saying that, it's got corn on it way over my head. It's being farmed. And somebody has leased it or rented it to a farmer to farm. Now, I don't know who owns it. I'll guarantee you that lady says she'll own it. It's really not a nest of worms you want to open up. I'm telling you. Nobody wants a convenience center. We're lucky to have the ones we have where they are. People felt sorry for the county and just let us put them there, I guess, is how we got those locations. But in the beginning, on Landfill Road, we were going to move the convenience center up to our old hill yard where we kept the open containers. I don't know if any of you's familiar with that or not. Mr. Cush may have went with us when Ketron and Mack and all of us went up there and viewed that. And to come up with the idea to move it on up the road on the opposite side. Well, I think there was a lot of reasoning for that. But the spot on where the hill yard was, it would work fine. And I think we really need to revisit looking at that spot. It belongs to the county. It's gravelled already, got a fence partially around it. Of course, none of that probably makes any difference because they'll tear it all up anyway. But it's been said that the road will not accommodate the traffic of the transfer station plus the people going to the convenience center. The road going to the transfer station now is wider than Jefferson Pike. And it all has to travel Jefferson Pike. So the road accommodates the Jefferson Pike. It's bound to be able to accommodate the county landfill road. I'd really like to see us look back at the county landfill road on moving that site.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mike, can you tell us the distance where this we have here on this picture here, where we have these open containers? Can you give us how many feet from that yard to Jefferson Pike is? And can you tell us approximately the size of that area where those containers are being staged. Can you do that for us on the fly?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That is if the gremlins don't get me.
The reason I'm asking Chairman Piercy is because I know that the engineering for that intersection included widening a bit using the maximum allowed of our easement, which I think was 50 feet. I think we have a 50-foot easement, and you may be correct. That may work. And so that's why I'm asking what that distance is from Jefferson Pike to that area.
Do you know if we've made any improvements for the site that was proposed first, as far as getting electricity or water? Hadn't electricity already been run to that site on the hill?
I'll defer that to Bishop if that's okay.
It is 4,000 feet to the front corner of the site, and I'll get you a distance.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
4,000 square feet, so under a mile.
4,000 linear feet.
Linear feet, yes, sir. Sorry, linear feet.
What was your question again, Commissioner?
What progress did we make on the site on Landfill Road that Mr. Ketron opted to move it to, over through the gate on the left? What's been done there?
We've removed topsoil and stockpiled material in 2 areas, put the temporary construction entrance in, and it had a company come out and look for a soil site for the septic system.
Has Middle Tennessee Electric run electricity up there for that?
The electric was run, the poles have been run down Landfill Road, but that's separate from, that was for the current operational location that we have. We've got a transformer for 3-phase power that goes to the shop that I'm currently operating out of.
So electricity goes by this site already, correct?
Yes, sir.
Enough to operate a compactor?
I do have
Convenience center?
I do have some concerns about the Hillyard site that I really need to look at and find out how much room we have to develop over that side, because I can't get into the footprint of the Class 1 landfill that's right there on the end, and I don't know what was discussed previously when that was a potential spot. So, you know, in all fairness, I would like a little opportunity to kind of take a look at my edge of waistline on that as it is involved with this particular location. But I mean, it is our property, I agree. We currently take trucks in and out of there. It will require some changing as far as our operational, because right now we use that every day as part of how we operate. So figuring those things out will be something that has to be included in the math too. So, but yeah.
Are you talking about storing the open containers? That's how you use it, correct?
That's so currently what we do use that for has to do with the landfill closes at 11 o'clock on Saturdays and they're closed on Sundays. So we have to store containers while we operate during the weekend, and that's where we store them. We store them there. It's because we don't keep the gate open to our regular landfill during the weekend closing hours so the public doesn't come up there. The concerns that were brought before us were brought before us by Republic Services initially about their concerns about the traffic of having citizens basically in 4-wheel cars on the road with the big semis that are coming down there with the waste. And upon reviewing that, and kind of I got with Greg Brooks' team, we took some traffic in and outs on there and kind of took a look at that, and that was what initially prompted the decision for us to put a pause on that, because I do feel that in its current structure, that there's some safety concerns there with that location. You know, I'm not saying they couldn't be abated or we couldn't figure out some way to come around it, but I would like some time to really take a look at where my edge of waste is on that location, and see how much room we got to play with there, and if there's something that we could actually develop there, or there was a site that was there that wouldn't impede our ability to function.
A couple of 3 years ago, I guess it was 2 years ago, there was plenty of room there for that. And for the open containers, once the convenience center was moved up County Landfill Road, they were going to use the convenience center property to put the open tops on, just reverse the use of it. It would be more convenient for y'all anyway, because you wouldn't have to go all the way up to dump them, all the way back up to reload them to dump. But I feel like the site's probably usable. For one thing, the road's a lot wider there than after you go through your gate. It gets very narrow right there. I wasn't a big fan of that to start with, but I really would like for us to look back at that old site before we go down on the Jefferson Pike at Angie Road and do damage there. There's a lot of people live down there that don't have a convenience center today, and they won't want one tomorrow either.
Bishop, what's the minimum requirement for a convenience center size?
Convenience center, well, the size.
The land size.
And for our needs, we need to be around 3.5 to 4 acres in order for us to be able to accommodate the. There are definitely some benefits to Landfill Road.
Well, if I could, so you're saying 3.5 acres? Mike, what's the size of that?
The footprint itself is only roughly about 3/4 of an acre.
Which site?
The site we're looking at on Landfill Road. I'll measure that again just to verify. Just the footprint of the gravel. Yeah, 6/10 of an acre. So, but we'd also have to take up room to stack cars outside of the normal travel lane. So everything would have to shift over, 11, 12 or more feet to get enough length to queue cars up to get into this site.
Honestly, without having some time to review the sizes and the dimensions of the center, I'm not prepared to really discuss this as an option. I can just tell you what we're using it for now. And the thing that concerns me the most is how far can we move toward the landfill before I get into edge of waste, and that's a violation of my landfill permit.
So, go ahead, Mayor. No, go ahead. So, Bishop, how would you like to leave this? I'm going through my old notes, and it seems like it was Greg Brooks that brought to our attention, hey, do we really want to commingle residential traffic with heavy truck traffic? He red flagged that as that's a dangerous safety issue, and was the main reason we drove and put a halt to the convenience center construction and moved it. I don't remember other factors involved. I remember that being the main driver. So do you need a minute to?
You're not going to like my answer.
Okay.
My answer is that I am your solid waste director. I will do and haul garbage and deal with it wherever you decide that's appropriate. I would like, if we're going to talk about, I have reviewed and seen the site that was proposed on the Wilson School site. There were a lot of reasons why I like that site, but I besides driving through it, I know nothing about that site. But if this body says build a convenience center on that site, I'm going to build a convenience center on the site. As far as this site as a proposed idea, like I said, I wasn't party to those discussions earlier, and I've got some concerns of my own that I want to investigate. Among one would be road width. Of course, I would want to get with Greg again and discuss that and see if that's a possibility. And then I can make a recommendation on what I feel is the safest, but ultimately, I serve you.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate Commissioner Piercy's remarks here. This is his district, and I'm going to be as deferential as I can in that regard, and to the people in that neighborhood. What I would like to do is and it was a text from Commissioner Dodd that got me thinking about this. We've got an RFQ we're going to put out for the redesign of that intersection. We can wait and see what that design looks like that would have some mitigating effect on where we put this. If we were to put it back on somewhere on Landfill Road, we can do that one. Number two, we can certainly take Mr. DeMasi's suggestion about having neighborhood meetings out there to determine what the temperature is for the people in that community. If they don't like it, they certainly have a great opportunity to voice that. But I would suggest, if I could, that we defer this for further discussion to the next meeting. But, Mr. Chairman, that's only a suggestion.
All right. Commissioner James, you looked like you had a question or a comment.
If we're going to defer it, I'm going to finalize my thoughts on it a little bit and have more time to really think it out. Maybe I find the answers that I'm kind of rattling around with, so I'll wait and see for a second. If we're not going to defer it, I might come back to it.
Commissioner?
Move to defer to a future meeting. And if I get a second on that, there's a comment.
Okay, we have a second. Comment?
Comment is that I think the county can do whatever it wants to. The community meeting is essential for the Planning Commission in making decisions as to what's in the best interest and how it affects that community. Outside of that, we always have a public hearing. I don't think it would be appropriate for it to go through the Planning Commission because the Planning Commission is not going to make any decision on where that's located. I think we, as a committee, could conduct a public hearing for informational purposes only. So instead of the Planning Commission, that probably should happen here, and we can do that. It could be an expanded public comments, or we could say that we're going to conduct a public hearing and invite that community to have input in that as well, positive and negative.
Very good. Chairman.
Well, having been here a little while and been on public safety for an extremely long time, I recall when Truman Jones was sheriff, one of the more dangerous intersections in the county was the intersection that you're talking about.
Really?
I would suggest you have Sheriff Fitzhugh pull those. I think it was Cutoff Road was probably the highest one, and then you got the other road. I forget which is which. Anyway, that is a dangerous intersection. If you start to do something like that, you better start looking at Jefferson Pike and putting a turn lane in at minimum. So I think when you go to digging into this, you're going to find out that there's a whole lot more worms start turning up than you would think.
All right. So that a motion and a second was to defer. All those in favor? Aye. All right. So that we will do that.
Thank you.
Any other business? Have I missed anything, Carla, on? I don't believe I have. Anything? All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your comments and participation and your service to the community.